and good afternoon. It's Shirley with Spirit of Matter. Here on the Venus Day, Sun Hour, with the Ascendant ruled by Venus. Venus being pretty in the 11th and the Sun in the 10th with the midheaven and Mercury. I kind of feel like talking about stuff, and I said I'll just press on because it's a fine election to do so. The moon is in the second house in Scorpio on 27th degree, separating from the opposition to Uranus and the square to Venus, Lilith, and Mars, and slowly beginning to apply to a square with Saturn. Okay, so we have this Saturn activated, okay, and the moon is trining Neptune and sextiling Pluto. Uranus, Jupiter, and Rahu with vertex are in the 8th house, whole sign speaking. But the first house is ruled by Venus, and Venus in her shade period. And I don't know why I was kind of called to try and do a synastry live with you, a synastry reading. And I'm like, okay, who do I know? But I'll first pop on and see the election. So for me, I know why, because the midheaven is in my 5th house with the ruler of my 7th house, that is Mercury. It is getting an update. The two charts I wanted to do. So one was trying to do a synastry live to say what couples do I know that are famous and are actually interesting to do a synastry on. I think Beyonce, Jay-Z have been like played out a lot, and it's also not the type of synastry that I want, because I want something that's more like positive and hopefully joyous. And I know that there was a lot to that coupleship that was not as easy. Okay, there are happy times and difficult times, but I said I want something that kind of like more joyous. And I was thinking actually about Black Sheldon and Gwen Stefani, so I'll see if I can do that. And another chat I was thinking about, it was not a synastry, but I won't say it. I'll just do it when I'll do it. But it's kind of popping out now too, so I'm gonna try and see. I'll go for that one first. So let's see if we get it. So let's see that we have one. Okay, we do have one. I'm going to not look at it and just immediately go to Spirit of Mattering it. So Thomas, let's see. So I'll try to predict stuff. It's something I haven't done in a while. So let's try to predict what's in his chart. I know his name was mentioned, I think in the astrology podcast, and there's a reason why I'm doing it. Oh my gosh, he died on the 4th of July. But I don't remember anything about his chart. So I wouldn't know. It's probably something Pisces, but other than that, I don't remember anything. So I don't even know what Pisces. It means it's good to go. Thomas Jefferson, April 13, 1743 to July 4, 1826. So 1743 already tells us he probably was a Pluto Aquarius, no, a Pluto Capricorn, or maybe Pluto Sagittarius. I don't know, because no, 1779 is already the Declaration of Independence, if I'm not mistaken. So 1743, it should be, it either is Pluto and Aquarius, don't tell me. Someone with me there. I'm half channeling and I would get like, don't tell me. Okay. Anyway, it's either Pluto in Aquarius, because it would go retrograde and forward, or Pluto in Capricorn. So he was an American statesman, diplomat, lawyer, architect, philosopher, and founding father, who served as the 3rd president of the United States from 1801 to 1809. among the committee of five charged by the Second Continental Congress with authoring the Declaration of Independence. Now, of course, Pluto is going over the Pluto return for the United States, and I'm being called to talk about this to US related stuff again and see it from my own eyes today. So Jefferson was the document's primary author following the American Revolutionary War. And prior to becoming president in 1801, Jefferson was the first US Secretary of the State under George Washington and then the nation's second vice president under John Adams. Okay, a lot of plutocrat roles. With that plutocracy, because he was a founding father, like it's probably it can be Pluto Capricorn, actually. It can be Pluto Capricorn generation. So he was vice president, and George Clinton, Aaron Burr. Third president of the United States, John Adams, James Madison. So before him was John Adams, and after him was James Madison. The second vice president of the United States, okay, and first United States Secretary of the State. So he was doing a lot of bureaucratic roles for the foundation of the land. United States Minister to France, and see. Okay, so Governor of Virginia, and okay. Well, he died at age 83. That would mean he would die around his Uranus opposition. Not opposition, Uranus return. I'm sorry. Uranus opposition is around your 40s, and he will die around, I think, probably after his Uranus return or around his Uranus return. So born April 13, we already know he has Sun in Aries. Of course, he's going to have something in Aries because he was from the founding fathers. So it's not surprising that he has a Sun there. And I'm kind of trying to think about the relation between Aries and Capricorn and Aries and Aquarius. So Aries, well, it would trine Sagittarius, it would sextile Aquarius. But then that depends where is the Sun and where. It can be an Aries-Pluto hard aspect or an Aries-Pluto Aries. Aries-Pluto. So that would mean Sun, Pluto, sextile. Can be, to the Sun Pluto square. Even if it's out of sign square, it can be a square. But that tells me already that this person, if what I'm saying is right, is it's a person that can cause a lot of polarity, and this is why I'm turning actually to the square. Okay, but let's read. So he was from the, Democratic Republican. Was it that he's switching things, or what's going on with US? Democratic Republican. So probably, is that meaning Republican? That mean it was right wing. Had 6 children, and so he had College of William and Mary, alma mater, politician and lawyer. That's a very fancy signature. I don't know how to read handwriting from the 1700s. So he was with the people who wrote the 1776. Okay, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, Notes on Virginia, Jefferson's Manual, and Jefferson's Bible. He's considered from the Age of Enlightenment, so from our spiritual ancestors, region, Western philosophy and American philosophy. Okay, I was more acquainted with European Enlightenment, but then pragmatism. I don't know. I don't think it was pragmatism. I don't know. Maybe he was. liberalism and deism. Okay, uh, so politics, ethics, religion, philosophy. His ideas, well, all men are created equal, is not just Jefferson. Okay, I don't know, like it's ideas that we remember from him, but it's just perhaps ideas he supported. So all men are created equal. Empire of liberty. When you think about empire, when I read the term empire of liberty, I think immediately of the paradoxes like a democratic Jewish state. You know, it's the desire to create something equitable, but it has a union. And that's very Aries. It's very Aries together with, can be both the moon when I think about this, because the moon is about the people, but the moon is more patriot. So this can be an influence of the moon because it's patriotic. And but the principle of equity, and that equity for every individual, is a very Aries one. And Aquarius does play a role here because it's about the masses. It's kind of like Aquarius is a more of a unifying the masses, while Aries is making sure that every individual within the masses has rights. And that is, but that does create this paradox of an empire of liberty. It's kind of like the cult of freedom. And we really need to honor this dissonance and understand the intricacy that the desire to do so is very correct. Well, you know, as like I said, you know, I'm very much affected by enlightenment. It's just that's my bias. Okay, but there is this intricacy where it is still an empire. It still conquers land. It still goes to war. It still defends itself in the international arena, and it's still, unfortunately, doing atrocities that negate the nature of liberty. And that is a dissonance that's in the heart of not only the United States, but also several countries that came up after the United States, Israel included. Entangling alliances, I don't know what that means. Let's check this out. Caution against entangling alliances was the early, oh my God, this is interesting, the earliest realist guide for the US foreign policy and the nation's interaction with others. According to policy, the United States should consider external alliances as temporary measures of convenience and freely abandon them with natural interest. This is America does not have friends, it only has interest. It's probably both the drive within the splendid isolation that's like was an extreme form, but it was a phase of it. United States, if you've seen the chart of the United States, we're going to take a look at it later, because we can't talk about the president without looking at the chart, the Sibley chart. But the thing is that the United States sure does not denote a splendid isolation. Okay, it's not a country that can survive in solitude. Well, also by merit of its applying or attempting to be more decentralized. You know, democratic is a study case of decentralized and equitable in idea. The policy has been cited as a rare example of an explicit endorsement of what is international relations known as the renversement des alliances, the reversal of alliances. Okay, this is so important because when you think about the First World War, the First World War basically broke when with the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, and he was government. I don't even remember what exactly was his role in the country. Was a president or a governor of a very small country that did not have anything but alliances. Okay, that would happen. When was it? Okay, that will happen 200 years, not 200 years, but that will happen 150 years. That's a half Pluto cycle. Okay, so around 150 years, a bit less, it's exactly a half Pluto cycle from this policy, from this thing. And there we would have the First World War breaking because of alliances that were not retracted. The entire world went into war over the assassination of a person in some faraway land that had alliances with great countries. And so, you can imagine that when he came up with this, and probably not the only one who came up with this, he was probably not the first, not the only, and he probably was learning from history when he did that. But unfortunately, less than 150 years ago was the First World War, even, a bit over, maybe 120. So we have the First World War, and it's like, oh, nobody learned anything. And they thought that the First World War is going to be the war that will end all wars. So this is why when we talk about the age of Aquarius or the age of air and the decentralization and the aspiration to democracy, but can come all the way to ideation of democracy in decentralized regimes. And I'm being especially cautious about this because Aquarius is my 12th house. Okay, so it's what I don't know that I don't know. I can have ideation over it, or I can have fear, unnecessary fear around it. So when we talk about history repeating itself, and when we talk about the age of air, there's just people tend to think, and me too, like this is the golden ages. But then what is the golden ages? Okay, we tend to think about the golden ages as this Garden of Eden, and maybe it is. But also, before the First World War, they also thought that this is going to be the war that will end all wars. So I don't know on the basis of what did they think like that. But that is, it's something that we need to be aware of. If we're not going to ideate, especially as Neptune is about to go into Aries, we may have war ideation. Okay, you may feel it on your personal life too, where you're like, some injustice happens and you just want to make it right. Okay? And it's very difficult, it's a personal difficulty. But that on a global scale, the desire to put an end to all these conflicts and this and that, and then it ends up in a world war. That's just the first of two. So Jeffersonian democracy. Let's look at what is Jeffersonian democracy. Deeply committed to American republicanism, which meant opposition to what they considered to be artificial aristocracy. Okay, and you have to understand that this is not anti-intelligence or anti-intellectuals. Okay, there's a difference between the anti-intellectualism that we met in fascism. And fascism, I mean genuinely fascism, not the curse, but the actual regime and conglomerate of ideas that was fascism, and not wanting the elite to have the only say on a topic. This is the conflict of representation, okay? Not versus governing, but definitely it's a conflict of representation versus professionalism. Okay, and it's not necessarily versus. It's not supposed to be versus. And you can obviously see where I'm biased to go here. So it's considered to be artificial aristocracy, opposition to corruption, and insistence on virtue, with a priority for the yeoman, farmer, planters, and the plain folk. It's the common people. They were antagonistic to the aristocratic elitism. Okay, this can be a bit of anti-intellectualism here, of merchants. Okay, it's not anti-intellectual. Okay, you get, and this, you gotta get, okay, we gotta talk about this today, because when we talk about anti-intellectual, I want to bring up COVID. So trigger COVID for people. You know, at the COVID, there was no way to talk about critique of Pfizer and or critique of vaccines, which is not the same, and or critique of this particular vaccine by Pfizer and Moderna, okay, without getting into, are you endorsed by the aristocratic elite that is now considered the scientific community, or are you an ignorant mass of people who think they are a snowflake and take their information from questionable sources? Okay? First of all, as a person who spent a lot of time being an academic, you genuinely the big ideals around it, because if you spend a lot of time being an academic, then the good thing that you do is to understand the limitation of your sources, the biases around this. Okay, with a concrete example from the medicine, I had a wonderful conversation with actually a social worker named Itai Kendall. He is bringing open dialogue approach to treat non-volitional, non-dual experience. This is my term. It's not about give me the credit, don't take the credit from me. It's just, I do not use the word psychosis. As I understand now more than ever, it's very much politically charged and not really scientific and actually helps patients. So he's bringing open dialogue to treat non-volitional, non-dual experiences within patients in a way that's actually based on communication, validation. The Finland stuff, they were doing everything wrong, and then they started to do some things right, and I need to take a look at this in some other videos. But we were having a conversation, and I was talking about certain things you meet in Africa, and he said, well, there was a person, I think it was a male researcher, that went to Africa and said, but in Africa they treat people so terrible. Why do people ideate this? And I told him, listen, he came as a man. Okay, he came as a man. That means the women would not trust him. They would not talk with him. They would think he will be offender. But if I, as a woman, meet a video of an African woman that holds a clove of garlic, you say, you shower with this and this and that way. You put this under your pillow in this and that way. And eventually you ask from this garlic to remove any rape attacks from your spiritual husband. Okay, what this basically means is spiritual rape or energetic rape. Nobody in Western community knows about this. Okay, if anybody tries to talk about them, any go through this, okay, and it's done by people in academia. It's done by people, whatnot, and nobody knows about this. Nobody knows about this. And if you go to a Westerner and say, oh, I had experience that happens to me, then they give you beta blockers, okay, so that they can try to block your neural activity that causes you to experience those experiences, rather than, and of course beta blockers kills people, but that's on another topic, rather than addressing the issue and giving validation to the ontological unit called energy, okay, and then working to protect your energy boundaries with the herbs, with the this, with the that, and the fact that I cross very good as a woman too, and I'm a woman too. I would get this conversation way easier than a man with a penis that crosses over as a man with a penis would get to speak to these ladies, because they wouldn't trust him, and rightfully so. Okay, it's not to blame. He can be the greatest man on earth. And this is something that whenever you have these conversations, okay, like the COVID, if you wanted to have a critique of the vaccine, but you were not a part of the scientific community consensus that was way more political than scientific, and any person who dared question this consensus was expelled out of their job. Doesn't matter for how many years they spent treating patients. Okay, we're talking about MDs here. We're talking about gynecologists. Okay, there was a while, I know in Israel, you could not get an appointment for a gynecologist for like 6 months. Okay, and we pay medical insurance. I pay medical insurance even when I get welfare. I pay medical insurance. So you could not have a say because it was so polarized. Having a critique of an intellectual is not anti-intellectualism. Okay? Merchants, bankers, and manufacturers are the common people. Okay, they're just, instead of farming the land, they are mining the result of the land, which is basically backed up by gold, which is the banking that we have today. And they're growing wealth. Okay, they're growing money, they're growing stocks, they're growing ideas. It's true that they're growing ideas. They're not growing ideas in the sense that, like a researcher does. Okay? But yes, they absolutely have their own ideas and their own concepts. But that being said, it's not, if you critique a person who's doing banking, okay, then you count as anti-intellectualism. And this is what his right wing was, from what I get here, was in favor of. Okay, if I'm the common person, let's say I have a couple of, a farm of strawberries. I want to sell these strawberries in the market. Okay, I need to sell these strawberries in the market. However much taxation I need to pay, and c'est tout. Voila. This needs to be simple to the common person. Okay, if it's not accessible, there's a problem here. Okay, because people get duped from what the taxation that they have to pay. And then they get evacuated from the land if they didn't pay correctly. And this is by a bureaucracy that's meant to be in this way to deprive the common people from the land. So they were antagonistic to the aristocratic elitism, distrusted factory workers, manufacturers, distrusted factory, wait, it is a merchant, distrusted factory workers, so probably the workers in a higher rank, and strongly opposed and were on the watch for supporters of the Westminster minister system. So let's look at that one. So it's a type of a parliamentary government that incorporates a series of procedures for operating a legislature. Here you can see where's the problem here. Too much bureaucracy. This is why I think he was, either he had Pluto retrograde in Capricorn, which can be the case, especially now Pluto is retrograde in Capricorn on the anaretic degree, or he already had a Pluto in Aquarius. So you think about it, he was born in 1774. There's something off here. He was born, I need to get this, not in office. 1743, I'm sorry, 1743. Oh, now it makes sense. Okay, never mind. Going forward. Okay, so we talked about, let's see. I want to go over each and every one of this. I feel that this is very much relevant for the times in general. Probably like a lot of Americans who are into these topics probably already know this, but it's very relevant for people like me who are not American, and perhaps for my viewers of international. And that's something that's going on in this country right now that we want to take a look at deeper, because it's having a touch on its Pluto return. That's a cycle of 248 years. And it's good to keep updated at why things happen, how things happen, what can we learn from that, we the people, as we come to this Pluto Aquarius, where we're going to have new settlements, new land, new forms of settlements. Okay, last time it was the kibbutz, basically the kibbutz, the commune. Okay, we're going to have new forms of new things. So let's learn from history. Let's learn what worked in the past, what didn't work in the past, what do we want to actually retrieve, or what do we want to actually innovate, where do we want to innovate. So Jefferson's writings and the advocacy for human rights, including freedom of thought, speech, and religion, inspired the American Revolution. And the word revolution. So immediately when I see revolution, I'm like, where's the guy's Uranus, or where's Saturn? Because Saturn is also ruling Aquarius, not just Capricorn. And Aquarius is basically the dogma outside the dogma. It's the anti-dogma, or the anti-hero. I don't remember who said the anti-hero relative to Aquarius. It's not mine, but I don't remember who said that. If you know, write in the comments. Where was his Uranus? I wouldn't know. But what was his Uranus doing? It can contact the luminaries. Okay, because he would be serving the people. So either is Uranus in the 6th house, okay, serving the people, but the people is Cancer or the moon. So Uranus moon some way. Uranus Cancer, Uranus moon. I don't know. Let's see. Ultimately led the American Revolutionary War, in which patriots defeated the British, leading to the American independence, the United States Constitution, and the establishment of the United States as a free sovereign nation. Okay, so but this is something I spoke about this today when I talked about fiscal astrology. Like, you're buying land off grid in America does not mean you don't pay property taxes, which actually belong to Great Britain. In Great Britain, you can decide upon an occasion what it does with that. Okay. So he was a leading proponent of democracy, republicanism, and individual rights, and produced formative documents and decisions at the state, national, and international levels during the American Revolution. Yeah, I want to reiterate that point again. That you found a country. Okay, you found a country on a certain land. You are accepted as a country. Okay? It doesn't mean that the land belongs to your country. There are several levels of ownership. For example, let's say we're going to have a new country somewhere. Give me a good location. Somewhere around where there are rivers. Oh, the continent of Africa is now dissolving. They say that, I don't know if it's true or not, it's dissolving to two new continents. It's going to be a river. And there's going to gap into whether ocean or sea. So around the bank of this, we're going to have a new country. Okay, because it's going to have some water. That means we're going to have vegetation. Yeah, which means we can have a good chance for good climate, some organic food. And we have a country. Now, let's say we get the permission to settle on this land, to grow crops, to have a country in there. Okay? It doesn't mean, okay, sometimes what happens is that this new country is going to pay whoever is the owner of the land, be it Great Britain or Great Britain, pretty much so, a sum of money, symbolic or not, to use the land for, let's say, 100 years. When these 100 years abrupt, the contract is open to renewal or discontinuing. How are you going to found a country on a land that doesn't have land? Because they would have the ability to send armed forces. They might not be willing to do this. Okay, they might not be willing to do this. Okay, but let's say they need a war. Okay, now you might be more in trouble. Let's say they need a war and you have natural resources. Now you might be more in trouble. So when you say, I'm saving all my money to buy land, to get off grid, to do a homesteading, yeah, it's like you're tending to it. but you also need to understand the depth of things. And it's like you paying money. Let's say you pay money to the United States, okay, or you pay money to Virginia, okay, you pay money to Virginia or Philadelphia. Okay, so you're paying money to Virginia, and Virginia pays money to the United States. And the United States still has contracts. Okay, we need to check this. Does the United States, what is the level of ownership the United States has over the land for how many years? Because once that's being renewed, okay, that means you're hardly ever off grid. Okay? Off grid it simply means that there's not a municipality there, or maybe you're gonna have to find your own infrastructure, or there's less regulation about buying a home, about settling in there. Okay, about settling in there, but it does not mean that this is no man's land. So that's something you need to take a look at. If you're buying land, if you're buying, property, you're not just looking at your own country. You're not just looking, if it's the United States, you're not just looking at the United States. If it's Israel, you're not just looking at Israel. If it's Jordan, okay, Israel, I think, would pay money to Jordan for 50 years or 100 years to use a certain land plot, okay, to grow crops, and then that had to be renewed. Okay, so we had a lot of problems around that time. And I think there was also Jordan doing the sales. Like, I'm not sure who was paying who, but those issues are things you need to think about, because you can have like 50 years of peace, 100 years of peace, and then suddenly like, whoa, what happened? Okay, and you won't even know what it is. Because think about renewing a contract. What happens before renewing a contract? It's kind of like people kind of test to see, do I want this for another year? Do I want this for another year? Are they going to raise the rent? What am I going to do? Are they going to get raised this? The goal is the same when you have land. When a country has land, it's the same as when you are a tenant. Okay. And it doesn't, we need to look at Great Britain for that. So, the Declaration of Independence adopted this. So those are the roles he played in the bureaucracy of the regime of the United States. Democratic Republican Party to oppose the Federalist Party. Okay, so basically this was the party of the people. You need to learn history, because now we look at Democratic and Republican. I was like, what is the Democratic Republican? Okay, I didn't know this. Okay, we didn't go all that far in resolution for the United States. To oppose the Federalist Party. During the formation of the nation's first party system. So that's actually worth looking into. So the Federalist Party was a conservative and nationalist American political party and the first political party in the United States. Under Alexander Hamilton, it dominated the national government of 1781 to 1801, defeated by the Democratic Republican Party in 1800, and became a minority party while keeping its stronghold on New England. It looks like the symbol of the sun, and made a brief resurgence by the opposing War of 1812, when it collapsed with its last presidential candidate in 1816. Remnants lasted for years afterwards. It appealed to business and to conservatives who favored banks, national over state government. Okay, so manufacturing, an army and navy, and in world affairs preferred Great Britain, and strongly opposed to the French Revolution. Okay, you see, these were the founding fathers of the United States. Okay, they were, and this is very much the spirit of the times, because what is true about Aquarius, that a couple of astrologers actually reiterate that, it's not coming from me. So, and I'm just not sure exactly which said it in that way, and where would I be misinterpreting. But the essence of it goes like this. This is not my idea. Okay, like I said, Aquarius is my 12th. So it says that with Aquarius, and I think it was Cameron, I might be misquoting him, so pardon me if I do that. Aquarius is basically the person who is the rebel that becomes a tyrant. Okay, so basically somebody rebels and then becomes tyrannical themselves. And so we see that the party that founded the United States, is the Federalist Party, basically became tyrannical because they supported Great Britain. Let's go to Great Britain and let's go to my academic offender teaching. Okay, it was not his, but that's the person from whom I learned this. And when they taught us about, the British Parliament, but they talked about labor. This is during this the suffragists, okay, the women who said, "Oh, we want to vote." What happened is that the women voted left because the left revolutionized, and after they got the right to vote, they vote for labor, and not for labor, for the conservative. And it was like, but why are you doing that? They knew exactly what they were doing, because when they asked the Conservative Party, are you going to change or reverse the right of women to vote? They said, no, we're the conservative. We come to preserve. Okay? And so it has its pros and cons. It doesn't mean that that's nasty. It doesn't mean that that's good. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's outdated. And so when they were both revolutionizing this federalistic, party, they were both revolutionizing the founding fathers of the United States, the first party in the United States, but now they wanted to preserve the United States. So they were supporting Great Britain, not the French Revolution. Get it? It can be, if you're not living and breathing these topics, then it can be very difficult and paradoxical to understand. But this is something that every person has to find a way to understand, and I have to find a way to explain to every person, because we are now in this time where a lot of countries are going to be founded, a lot of new forms of settlement are going to be founded, and we need to take a look at what's happened. So because, well, of course, we're going to do some of the same mistakes, but if we can learn from something, then why not set the intent to do a bit better, right? So yeah, the party favored centralization. Okay, you can see how that could be in a Capricorn, like Pluto Capricorn returns, like, oh, now we want to settle. Federalism, modernization, industrialization, and protectionism. So protectionism, it refers to erect tariff and other barriers on imported goods. So basically desires for a country to have internal economy that is strong and reduce import and export. Okay, what you get when you pay, I don't think VAT refers to that, but there's a tax, here we call it meches, and when you import goods, okay, for example, if I import an essential oil blend, which I did, there's nothing like this in Israel. I would have bought in Israel. There's nothing like this in Israel. I have to buy it, from the States or from Europe, from somebody who's practicing this. And when I buy it for myself, it's an import. So if it gets caught, okay, they don't check everything. But if they check this, then and I had to pay an extra 50 shekels, okay, which is like $50 for American. And that is, it's just life. Okay, if they would have done this in Israel, I would have bought in Israel, but they don't do this in Israel. Why wouldn't I support my colleagues in Europe or in the United States? If I can and when I can. So I gladly pay the tax, and I'm more concerned about where my tax money is going than having to pay tax. So yeah. In the US, this policy was most prevalent in the 19th century. Okay. So that's the Federalist Party. During the formation of, so Jefferson anonymously wrote Kentucky and Virginia resolutions in 1798 and 1799, which sought to strengthen states' rights by nullifying the Federal Alien and Sedition Acts. Okay. Let's talk about these. There were political statements in which Kentucky and Virginia legislatures took the position that the Federal Alien and Sedition Acts were unconstitutional. Ooh, I think I'm getting where I wanted to get. That were a set of 4 laws enacted in 1798 that applied restrictions to immigration and speech in the United States. The Naturalization Act increased the requirement to seek citizenship. The Alien Friends Act allowed the president to imprison and deport non-citizens. Okay, so when you hear Donald Trump talking about raising the bar and not allowing people to get into America, kind of believing that it's not the acts of America outside America, but rather the citizen or the people outside America that are doing the terroristic and inhumane acts towards American citizens, because that's what he's bothered by as a, an ex-president. And he talks about, okay, let's just not let these crooks enter our country. Then that's what he's referring to. Okay, it's those types of thinking, alien and sedation acts. It's kind of like we don't want everybody to be an American. We don't want external people to affect the internal regime, which is not illogical. But then when you talk about the United States, you also talk about the country that does a lot of things in a lot of other countries. So let's say if you are, exploiting Mexico, and then the people have no way to make a living, that they try to cross the American border, and then where would they work because they don't get any job and they don't get any support? Then, you can't divorce by exploitation. You really have to let go. Anyway, so that's the point. Act of seditions expired after a set of number of years, and the Naturalization Act was repealed in 1802. The Alien Enemies Act is still in effect. Okay. I'm not going to go all the way into this because there's so many things to get into, and I want to get a fine episode. So the resolutions argued that the states had the right and the duty to declare unconstitutional those acts of Congress that the Constitution did not authorize. In doing so, they argued for the states' rights and the strict construction of the Constitution. The Kentucky and Virginia resolutions of 1798 were written secretly by Vice President Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, respectively. So these are the pictures, this Jefferson above and Madison next to him, like the next one. The principles stated in the resolutions became known as the Principles of 98. Adherents argued that the states could judge the constitutionality of a general government law and decrees. The Kentucky Resolution of 1798 argued that each individual state has the power to declare that federal laws are unconstitutional and void. Okay? Basically, it's in the end, if you think about it, the army equivalent of that is illegal order. Okay? You have to, you basically are obligated to disobey illegal orders. Okay? Of course, nobody actually supports people who do disobey illegal orders on a political level, because the United States was founded on the principle that you have to protect yourself from the regime. You need to be cautious of the regime. You need to carry arms. You need to be able to willingly protect your land. It is the United States, the land, versus the United States, the government. Okay. Which now Israel is following through, because there are many people, even culturally, when people say with Israel, "Ani ohev et haaretz," okay, I love the land. Okay? And then the following sentence can be either, I don't like the people, okay, which sometimes where people are getting aggravated by each other, or I don't like the rulership. Okay, when people say, "Ani ohev et haaretz," I love the land, you know that this is in the spirit of these types of thoughts. Okay, I'm going to protect the land, but I'm not here to impose a tyrannical government of any sort. So the Kentucky resolution added when the states determined that the law is unconstitutional, nullification by the state is the proper remedy. Okay, so they tried to find in the algorithm, they looked for the juristic to at least have a heuristic framework or juristic structure that allows for more life to grow, basically. Okay, they try to do it by heuristics. So, Virginia resolutions of 1798 refer to interposition to express the idea that the states have a right to interpose to prevent harm caused by unconstitutional law. Let's go next. The resolutions were produced primarily as campaign matter for the 1800 United States presidential election. And oh, there I got no. Let's go to the point amongst many. Okay. British Parliament responding by passing the intolerable acts. Day of fasting and prayer, protest of boycott all British goods. So boycotting British goods is something that he supported. So commerce wars. So Jefferson basically claimed people have the right to govern themselves. Okay, if all men are created equal, then all men have the right to govern themselves. This is very Aries. Okay, it's not Aquarius. You have to have the combination of Aquarius and Aries to go there. We're gonna have it. We're gonna have Pluto sextile in Neptune. When Neptune is in Aries and Pluto is in Aquarius, we're gonna have that. It's gonna be Neptune in Aquarius, in Aries. Sorry. Monticello, marriage and family, and that can actually means that people are actually gonna spy on each other, unfortunately. So. More into this. Should I go into his private life? Let's see, because sometimes they connect. Jefferson married his third cousin, Martha, 23 years old widow, and she moved into the South Pavilion. She was frequent hostess for Jefferson, managed a large household. The happiest period of Jefferson. So it was his, I guess, happiest marriage. Was he married before, probably? That architecture is my delight, and putting up, pulling down, one of my favorite amusement. Okay. Designing Monticello as an architect. So he liked architecture. Construction was done mostly by local masons and carpenters assisted by Jefferson slaves. So we know about Jefferson that he held slaves. If I'm not mistaken, he's the person who actually called to abolish slavery. Okay, even though and say, oh, he called to abolish slavery even though he had slaves, or he had slaves and then he realized that we need to abolish slavery. He moved into the South Pavilion, turning Monticello into a neoclassical masterpiece in the Palladian style was his perennial project. So he had also this design and architecture. This means that it can be that the Venus is ruling the fourth house and Venus in the second or something, because Venus is a skill of design and houses. It's the fourth house. Here, design in houses. So he had happy marriage. So let's talk about his death. Martha's father died in 1773 and the couples inherited 135 slaves and 1,100 acres. and the estate's debt. Okay, and then the debt took Jefferson years to satisfy, contributing to his financial problem. This is super important because now we know something about a person who would be one of the legislative forces in the United States that had endured debt himself. Now, of course, the founding fathers of the United States escaped debt. Okay? So there's definitely the revolting Saturn as the ruler of Capricorn into Saturn as the ruler of Aquarius. Okay? Relief from debt. Because sometimes debt is good. Some people would say even that we come to the world because we have debt, we have karma. And so because we have karma, okay, so it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like owning somebody a favor just so that you can meet them again. Okay? So this debt is not necessarily a bad thing, but when it's so much so that the person like really can't do it, the debt has served its purpose, and now it's becoming an oppressive tool rather than a connective tool. Okay? When I took the debt that got me the funding of my studies, I was basically saying, let me die with dignity, or let me do something that can actually promote me, that can actually make me a better person. Let me study. Okay, let me dedicate my life to studies. So that was a debt that basically got me my son. I have Saturn in the 9th house, so through debt going into academia and so on and so forth. Because I was not, I'm the first generation enough in my family, together with, my, you call it niece, the daughter of my mother's father, it's niece. Okay, so we were both the first to go from a modern family. Okay, don't know the deeper ancestry into academia, and that we didn't have the wealth for that. We were working class, so that's one way of debt. But when debt becomes something that you can never pay, then it's already served its purpose. It's already served its purpose because now it's not like I'm going to grow and then I'm going to pay this debt and then I'm going to be so grateful for this time that I was able to accomplish that. Now it becomes something that there is no way for me to grow because all this debt does not leave me a place to live and a place to stay. And this is where we go from Capricorn into Aquarius to debt relief, and when we have a president that went through this, it's like they had 11,000 acres, but it had a lot of debt. Okay? And that is a person that already understands the reality of someone who deals with debt no longer being a vehicle for growth and transformation and dedication and endurance and achievement. So, yeah. Revolutionary War. So he was the author of the Declaration of Independence at age 33. So this was between his Saturn return to his Saturn maturation and the youngest delegates to the Second Continental Congress in 1775 at the outbreak of the American Revolutionary War, where a formal Declaration of Independence from Britain was overwhelmingly favored. Okay. Jefferson was inspired by the Enlightenment ideas of the sanctity of the individuals and the writing of Locke, of course. Like I said, Locke talked about, John Locke actually talked about the person as being tabula rasa, which may be only partially true, especially if we take incarnations into account. But he definitely reiterated on the idea that all men are created equal. Okay, and this means all people, of course, and Montesquieu. So of course, Charles Montesquieu, when he thought about decentralization and of the regime, okay, that's the founding father of democracy, he didn't conceive that women will have the right to vote. But at his time, who thought about this? Do I think that my cat needs to vote? But if you find a way to manage to communicate with my cat in a way that we both understand each other and the people understand, I ask, oh, but it's like, you nuts? Of course. Okay? It's like, if you're unhappy, I don't get food. How is that okay that you don't get food? You have to go, and sometimes I get food, and sometimes I get this food, and sometimes I get that food. Like, hey, I need to have a saying here. If you would have come with me to the neighbors, you would have seen they cook meat every day. Just ask them. Okay? But that's how they viewed women. Nobody thought that women would have an idea about these things because they weren't used to seeing women having an idea about these things. And that needs to change, right? It still does. Jefferson sought out John Adams, a Continental Congress delegate from Massachusetts and an emerging leader in the Congress. They became close friends, and Adams supported Jefferson's appointment to the Committee of Five, which was charged by the Congress with the authoring a Declaration of Independence. The five included Adams, Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin from Pennsylvania, Robert R. Livingston from New York, and Roger Sherman from Connecticut. The committee initially thought that Adams should write the documents, but Adams persuaded the committee to choose Jefferson. Okay, so he's probably very good. He was probably a good man of word, and that's a mercurial tendency, or maybe a descendant on Spica. The Spica is very eloquent. Jefferson consulted with his fellow community over 17 days, mostly wrote the Declaration of Independence in isolation between, okay, this is something that I did not know. I had no idea that the Declaration of Independence was written by one man. And this was the man. So I had no idea. Like, oh my God. In isolation between June 11 and 28, 1770. You know what? If this was a class, I would say, please write the Declaration of Independence of your country and serve it for me for the next for the next day, and I would credit you in my own if I write one. So what's a good practice of exercise? What would your declaration? Now we have Rao approaching Aries in Aries. Okay, what would the declaration of your independence would look like? What would you write in there? Or how would you perform it, and so on? It's a good question. So yeah, there are all these things. From the second floor of a 3-story Georgian-style home he was renting at 700 Market Street in Center City, Philadelphia. The residence was then owned by Jacob Graff, a bricklayer whose grandparents... So it was owned by a person who was the builder. This is such an honor, to write a document at the person who builds houses and owns the houses that he builds. We really need to have more of that. Whose grandparents had emigrated to Philadelphia from Germany in 1741. So the Declaration of Independence was written in real estate that actually was belonging to a person who lays bricks. You think about how symbolic this is. I don't know how to delineate this astrologically, like bricks. Somebody who was building houses, and the Declaration of Independence was written there. This is so powerful, and it's the context. It's not just the person who wrote this, but also the place and the context. It was written by one man. Oh, I didn't know that. In authoring the Declaration, Jefferson drew considerably on his proposed draft from the Virginia Constitution, George Mason's draft of the Virginia Declaration of Rights, and other sources. Okay. Other committee members made some changes, and final draft was presented to the Congress in June 28, 1776. So the Declaration was introduced on Friday, June 28. The Congress began debating over its contents on Monday, July 1st, resulting in the removal of roughly a fourth of Jefferson's original draft. The hurdle of being a founding person of something, including a passage authored that was critical of King George III, Jefferson's anti-slavery clause, which criticized King George for importing slavery to the colonies. Okay, Jefferson resented the charges the changes but did not speak publicly about the revisions. So now this is really important because this means that this person, although he owned slaves, he was already advocating for them. And you kind of think, to do this, a person who wasn't like, there wouldn't be no contact between white man and the slave if he was not owning slaves themselves. Okay? Think about class, think about, how. And so for him, black slaves in America context, I know there were white slaves. I'm not, downplaying that in any way, shape, or form. But he owned slaves. That means he was communicating with slaves. That means he understood what slaves' life is because they were living in his house. And then he advocated for slaves. And that was in the Declaration of Independence. This is something that we need to understand because right now, at this very moment, many Jeffersons are writing these declarations. And it's up to the people to not censor the parts that gave us the legitimacy over the monopoly of power as people. So yeah. July 4, 1776, the Congress ratified the declaration and the delegates signed it on August 2. In doing so, the delegates were knowingly committing to the act of high treason against the crown, which was deemed the most serious criminal offense and was punishable by torture and death, including hanging almost to the point of death, followed by emasculation, disembowelment, decapitation, and dismemberment, chopped into 4 pieces, with the remains then often displayed in public to serve as a warning of the fate of traitors. Okay, if you have to do this much to ensure that someone will stay with you, you're probably not a good leader. So Jefferson's preamble, and now this is Great Britain. We don't know if the laws have changed so much. Can you tell me Brexit? Jefferson's preamble is regarded as an enduring statement on individual and human rights, and the phrase "all men are created equal" has been called one of the best-known sentences in the English language. The Declaration of Independence historian Joseph Ellis wrote it in 2008 represents the most potent and consequential words in American history. Virginia state legislator and governor. Okay, so establishing religious freedom, prohibited state support of religious institution of enforcement of religious doctrine. The bill failed to pass, how surprisingly, as did his legislation to disestablish the Anglican Church. But both were later revived by James Madison. Okay. Again, it takes more than one person to change humanity. But the very fact that there's a person that did that we can return to that and we can know that is quite important. It's remembrance. And there's just so much in here. Minister to France, Secretary of the State, the presidency, political, so interest and activities, legacy, probably. So individual liberty, democracy, and republicanism. Considered a Renaissance man. American Civil War. Okay. Jefferson and President Woodrow Wilson even described Jefferson as thought a great man, not a great American. Though a great man, not a great American. This is, of course, the most important thing for a nation is to have a person who is more of a great person than a great nationalist. And that is what would make a national endeavor great. Again, or not again. But this is, of course, the filters I'm going through, being third generation to the war, raising on the shoulders of people like Brecht, who were tremendous plagiarists from everybody they were sleeping with, and God bless him, he was sleeping with everybody. And he said, this is Bertolt Brecht. It's probably not Bertolt Brecht, but that's how we can read it. And he said, the love of a nation that expresses itself as just, patriotism that is just loving my nation is beautiful. But patriotism that expresses itself as hating other nations is no longer patriotism. It's no longer beautiful. Okay? So it's much more important for people to love the land than to love the country. In the 1930s, Jefferson was held in higher esteem by Roosevelt with the New Deal, the common man, that reclaimed him as the party's founder. Jefferson became a symbol of American democracy in the incipient Cold War, and the 1940s and 50s saw the zenith of his popular reputation. Following the civil rights movement of the 1950s and the 1960s, Jefferson's slaveholding came under new scrutiny, particularly after DNA testing in late 1990s supported allegation he had fathered multiple children with Sally Hemings. Okay, so there we have also a story here with who's this Sally Hemings, right? Because now we remember Jefferson as, oh, he liberated slaves, but maybe this lady Sally was a woman who tempted him to do so. Okay. And let's see if we have her natal chart. And you understand that in this position, not only in the look of today, we can't necessarily be sure that they had an affair. Okay? Like, what would be the implication of her saying no to him? Natal chart. No, we don't have the natal chart of Sally Hemings. But she's definitely probably the instigator of the release from slavery. She probably made him very more aware as a man of the implication of his actions, and was smart enough and perhaps seductive enough to tempt him to let go of that. So we think about Thomas Jefferson as a great man, but a lot of that, it was probably his wife. And now it's a good time. So, and just like I said, it's also happening for women. It's not about gender. Okay, I would not be the Me Too veteran that I was if I didn't have like the full support of a person. Yes, later I separated and she turned violent, but at the time who was supportive, and that was a man. Okay, so it's something that we need to honor. But when we talk about the women behind the successful men and the men that are supporting successful women. So what do we have here? Thomas Jefferson, 13 April 1744. Here is the chart. Midheaven with Uranus. Uranus in Capricorn. Pluto in Scorpio? I would not guess. I would not guess that. Yeah, because Pluto takes, and Pluto moves quickly around Scorpio. And it was the Sagittarius. We went all the way until 1776. It was already in Capricorn. And he was 33. Right? And it was mid-Scorpio. And indeed the Pluto retrograde, but look at the outer planets. I talked today about the inner planets to outer planets. So here was ascendant Taurus with Venus on the ascendant and Rahu on the ascendant. Okay. Pluto in the 7th house does denote of power. It means that the native needs to understand power when it comes to one-to-one relations. Okay? And that unfortunately can mean where is Mars with the ruler of the 70s in the 4th. So indeed, he owned, unfortunately, the spouse. If Sally Hemings was probably his lover, then that was the case. He had moon. His moon was next to the rising of the United States in the Sibley chart. So moon in Sagittarius, That's the synastry of him and the country that he was founding. In conjuncting his ascendant, so he was a great man, but not a great American. This is something that very much is expressed by this in conjunct. Okay, even though he was very much emotionally attached to the United States, it doesn't mean that he was representing the United States in the usual way. The in conjunct is an unusual relational pattern. And so because Venus and the moon are also in the same position here of in conjunct, that tells me that this person had unconventional relations or unusual relations. It was very difficult to understand and come to understand the women that he was with. So even when he was married. Rahu in the first maybe attempts to go and follow his own path followed an unusual way, or it took a while. It's like it took until his 40s for him to establish himself as a self-made person. Ruler of the first in the first. Okay, this tells us of a person who has of high self-importance. It doesn't mean that they're narcissistic. It just means that their life path is about who they are. And it's a path of beauty, it's a path of value, it's a path of, he could be a banker, he could be a great banker with this one. So then we have Venus square Mars, Mars in Leo, and trine in the moon. For Aquarius, where's Saturn? Okay, Saturn is in his 4th house retrograde, so retrograde Saturn would give me this. But even without retrograde Saturn, there's Uranus in Capricorn, so he would definitely be rebellious about anything that is Capricornian, and his midheaven with Uranus, if this is the correct chart, and his midheaven with Uranus kind of gives me this sense of he was born to rebel. Before I'll get to asteroids, so he had Mercury in Pisces. The man who wrote the Declaration of Mercury right of my ascendant, bless him. The man who wrote the Declaration of Independence for the United States had Mercury in Pisces. As I was in the bus, I was thinking about the fallen planets. Okay? And you're gonna understand, Jean-Claude Van Damme had a fallen Mars in Cancer. Could you argue that Mars is fallen for what Van Damme is known for as a martial artist? Probably not. Was another example. I don't have it on the spot. Okay, but look at this Mercury. There's Mercury in Pisces. And he was a man of words. Leading the founding father of a nation where words mean everything. Here, the United States is a very verbal culture. Anybody, if you take a look even in Benjamin Netanyahu, is the Israeli prime minister, where he learned how to talk in the United States. He learned how to debate, how to talk, how to present an argument. And the founding father who wrote the Declaration of Independence for this country had the fallen Mercury in Pisces. You really have to think about the fallen planet. A fallen planet may mean a planet that deals with a lot, okay? But it doesn't mean a planet that does not, that the native will not operate well in manners relative to this planet. Can you argue that Thomas Jefferson was not a man of the word? Okay, you may argue that he was not a man of his word. And of course, what were these words doing? A revolution. Okay, he was a man of his word. Sextile in Uranus with the midheaven in Capricorn. Okay, Declaration of Independence. This is clearly, that's like, it's not something I predicted. It's not something I expected even. But look at this, you cannot argue what this does. Sun in Aries, we know. We had Sun in the 12th house. Okay, this is the ascendant. Squaring Uranus. Trining Moon. And Sun trines Moon, it tells me, and of course trining Mars here. Sun, the trine, the fire trine in this case between Sun, Moon, and Mars, it tells me that who he was, how he felt about it, and what he did about it were congruent. Okay? Who he was, how he felt about it, what he did about it, those were congruent. But then his Sun squared Uranus. So, and his Moon in conjuncted Venus. So, like every person, he had his own intricacies. It also means that being himself was created an upheaval. He could only exist as the founding father of another entity, which was the United States. Jupiter here retrograde in Virgo. Saturn is not too far from Regulus. Okay, let's take a look at. Yeah, Saturn is on the anaretic degree. Saturn retrograde on the anaretic degree, revolutionizing, rethinking a certain structure. And here on Regulus, so he was challenging the structure of the kingdom. Okay, fortunately, it was not cut in four, and everything was okay. And he died at age 83. Okay, relatively good age for the times. So if you're doing an act of rebellion, take his chart, like take this as a talisman with you. He had his Sun next to my Mercury. So take this as kind of like you can be who you are and challenge the kingdom, and they won't cut you in four or anything like that. You just stick around, you find something new, you make it happen. Neptune with Chiron sextile in Pluto, so still Neptune, trine in Pluto. It was the trine of Pluto to Neptune. His Venus on my Sun, his Mercury on my ascendant, and his Uranus on my lot of fortune. This is an interesting chart. Pluto separating from my applying to my Saturn. Moon on my Uranus. Okay, I understand why I needed to see this chart. And Mars is here where Venus is at with Lilith now. Okay, so Mars is there. What else on? So let's look at rulerships before we go to. So we talked about the ruler of the 7th being in the 4th. So the partner was somebody that was at the home that he was growing. In this case, the ruler of the 5th in the 11th. So 5th is also joy, and Jupiter there in the 5th retrograde. So the joy of revolution, maybe you can understand it like that. The ruler of the 9th in the 4th. So the worldview, the philosophy of a homeland, of a nation, of a declaration of independence. Ruler of the first in the 1st, ruler of the 6th in the 1st. So by being who he is, he was of service, but also had open enemies. So he was of service to people. Jupiter is ruling the 11th and the 8th house here in the 5th. Okay. I don't have any particular thing to say about that. Lilith in the 8th house, and that can mean that certain things to do, the women he was attracted to loved freedom. So that means that he may own, other than, Uranus with his midheaven and so on, but he may own a lot of his empowerment to women who like, how should I say, deliberately, what made them water was freedom. Okay, so of course, if it is a slave, that you have a black slave and you want the water to come, you need to free slaves, huh? So that's why I wanted to see the chart of the spouse or of the lady. Okay, and with the spirit of Venus, Lilith, and Mars and Leo, I've talked deliberately. I wouldn't have said it in that way in another time, but that's true, you know. And this is why where the Lilith power is coming from here. The ruler of the fifth, yeah, it's in the 11th. So it means that when he's turned on, there's some sort of an agenda around this. And yeah, he was a good coupleship that could not be public at the time. But we don't know if it was partnership or if it was not, because we don't have, like, I didn't read her about this. So yes, Venus and with the ascendant tells us of the native is quite attractive. Okay, with Rahu it can be well, I don't know, but it does mean that the person aspires to be someone and aspires to be someone on themselves. Okay, self-made person. Let's look at asteroids. So that would be more helpful. No, something is going on here. It's just the right. Okay. Is it that we don't know? Like, what is going on? Because I see so many zeros, and it cannot be that all of them were in that place. I'm not sure what's on. It all says 0 Aries. That's not going to be helpful for me. I guess we don't have the asteroids for then. Or maybe there's something with the program. I don't know. Well, I don't have the asteroids. So I cannot tell you because I don't know. Where were they? And that's the chart. That's the chart. So this is the person that wrote the Declaration of Independence for the United States. And I promised you that I'm going to look at the Sibley chart. So let's take a look at the Sibley chart here real quickly. I don't know if it's Sibley or Sibley. Sibley chart. Chaldea. Okay, this is a new site to me. That would give me, well, the pictures are not very clear. Let's try to look for a better graphic for this. I want to go over the lesser known sites. So I can give a chance, because I show my screen, that can give chance for some people who run these sites to get some acknowledgement. So this is Alex Trenowworth, astrologer, author, and teacher. And he talks about the Sibley chart. And here we have a picture of the Sibley chart with the ascendant in Sagittarius. So yeah, Jefferson's moon was with the ascendant of the United States, the first house of the United States. For Cancer, you see here Mercury, 24 Cancer. I think 24 Cancer is around Procyon. I'm not sure where Procyon is. I think 25 Cancer. And Procyon is about sweetening things with words. And Americans are known actually as being very sweet. They're being very kind and sweet with words, but sometimes the words do not back up. Like they don't have the actions to back it up. This is what people know. It's like people are going to be nice to you. They're going to be sweet to you. They're going to talk sweetly. But it's not going to be like, yeah, you can come over sometimes. Right? So That's the thing, and that's Mercury with Cancer, Sun. Oh, Sun on Sirius. Respect. So Sun on Sirius. I have my moon there. I have my moon with the Sun. Okay. So Jupiter in 5 degrees and Venus in 3 degrees. I have my Vesta there. But for Jefferson, what he had in Cancer, let's take a look at his chart again. What did he have in Cancer? He had Chiron and Neptune on 9 degrees of Cancer. And he had the IC on Cancer, but it was the IC with the Mercury of the United States, but, oh yes, of course, he wrote the Declaration of Independence. Of course. The IC with the Mercury of the United States. What did that? He wrote the Declaration of Independence. The founder in word, and it was the worldly founder. Okay. So that's Jefferson. I want to look at the Sibley chart again. Sibley chart. Oh, here. Can join their news tower. Well, he didn't have anything in Gemini, so yeah. Uranus, by the way, it is something that you need to understand. Israel is approaching its Uranus return. It would be after the United States. The United States Uranus is in Rohini Nakshatra. It's 2 degrees, it's 2 degrees away from Aldebaran. Okay, this is a country where it has a revolution. Somebody is victorious. Okay, the revolutionary become victorious. Okay, the revolutionary forces become victorious. So ladies with penises, ladies with vaginas, people rebel. But Jefferson himself did not have anything in particular there. The United States does have Mars on Mercury, in Mercury sign, does have Mars in Gemini, which is considered unfavorable. Although this Mars trines Moon. So the pen and the gun, like the pen and the sword, the word and the sword is very much relating to this. And Uranus and the Moon in Aquarius, 27 degrees of Aquarius. Of course, Pluto here, 27 degrees of Capricorn. Mercury opposing Pluto. Okay, so a lot of intensity towards thinking, towards philosophy, but towards thinking, towards words, intensity of argumentation, but it can be alienating. Okay. Neptune in Virgo, 22 degree. Midheaven here in Libra, already 1st degree of Libra. Saturn in 14 degrees of Libra in the 11th. So a ton of regulations. And Chiron in Aries, 20 degrees. The Rahu Ketu, so Ketu, no, Rahu, I'm sorry, Rahu is in Leo in the 7th degree. Now let's look at Jefferson's chart. For Leo, no, he didn't have anything on that phase of Leo. He had Mars in Saturn. Yeah, the Sun in 23 degrees. Okay, so this is the United States is Chiron in 20 degrees. Yeah, for Sagittarius, we said the ascendant. We also said Lilith. So this Lady Sally, she's probably one of the founders of the United States. Okay, so the United States of a black woman is a founding mother that we need to take into account when we want to understand how did these ideas came about. And the black origins of the United States, that were there in the Declaration of Independence. The call to abolish slavery was there in the Declaration of Independence. Okay, foundationally, it's not a terrible country. But that's why sometimes we need to go to our founding fathers and our founding mothers. So there's a black woman that basically contributed to the foundation of the United States. Quite impressive. And it's impressive for many reasons, as well as how will the United States take its own turn from now on. And equity in people. And you also need to see, because yeah, this lady, she was a black woman, so of course she wants, slaves to be free so that black women will be free. I don't know too much about her, and this is probably for another episode. She probably deserves an episode for her own, but I don't have her chart. So I don't know what would she make as a governor. Like, the fact that she was a black woman, okay, but how would she treat women? How would she treat LGBTQ? How would she treat, other people, like people who were slaves to black people? I don't know. I don't know anything. So that's something I'm thinking about. Well, yeah, that's it. That's it for now. Very interesting chart. Thank you so much for watching. So as of my predictions, I don't think a lot of them were borne out in this case. I thought it was Pluto Capricorn, he's Pluto Scorpio. I was obviously not calculating things right. Um, I expected something with Uranus to the personal planet. I would think it's the moon, but it was actually Mercury. I definitely did not predict him to have a Mercury on, a fallen Mercury for the Declaration of Independence of the United States. So, this is, well, what you can take from this, other than, political stuff. If you have a fallen Mercury, look at Jefferson. Maybe you're the next Jefferson. I definitely, like, we knew he has Sun in Aries, and I did not predict the ascendant Taurus. I thought maybe Libra because he was doing heuristics. But I did not predict that he would have ascendant Taurus or like Venus on the ascendant. Like, I did not know any of that. The moon, it's not, unexpected that the moon is with Sagittarius and the sun is with Aries. That is actually lovely, but it's not something I predicted. Yeah, and Saturn retrograde, but I didn't expect it to be in Leo, although it's quite obvious why it's so close to Regulus. They were separating from the British Empire. So yeah, interesting stuff. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye. And you can subscribe to me, of course, and so on and so forth.